If you're learning German, I guarantee you've stumbled over this one. When on earth do you use aus versus von when you're saying coming from? They feel so similar, right? But it's one of those little things that can trip you up. Well, today, we're going to crack this code for good. Okay, let's just dive right in with a classic puzzle. Picture this. You've just grabbed your groceries and you're heading home. Do you say, ich komme aus dem Supermarkt or ich komme vom Supermarkt? You're probably thinking, one of these has got to be wrong, doesn't it?
Well, here's the twist. They can both be totally correct. The secret is that they just mean slightly different things. And trust me, by the end of this, you're going to know exactly which one to pick to say what you really mean. So here's our game plan to get you there. We're going to solve that supermarket puzzle by breaking down the core rules for aus, then the rules for von. We'll see how they can overlap, touch on one tiny but important grammar tip, and then wrap it all up with a super handy cheat sheet.
Let's get started with our first preposition, aus. It really boils down to two main ideas. One is about physical places, and the other is about where you're from. We'll start with the physical spaces. So the number one rule for aus is all about places you can be inside of. I want you to think of it like a container. If a place has walls, a door, a fence, some kind of clear boundary, and you're physically walking out of it, aus is your word. For instance, you come aus dem Park, out of the park, aus der Dusche, out of the shower, or aus dem Haus, out of the house. See the pattern? You are physically in something, and now you are out. Simple as that. Okay, now for the second rule for aus. And this one is an absolute golden rule. You can take it to the bank. It's non-negotiable. When you're talking about where you're from, your home country, your home city, it is always, always aus. You'd say, ich komme aus Polen, oder ich komme aus Berlin. You would never, ever use von for this. For your origin, it's aus, period. End of story. Lock that one away. So let's switch gears and talk about von. What's cool here is that its rules are pretty much the flip side of the coin to aus. They work together perfectly. Remember how aus was for coming out of a container? Well, von is for when there is no container. It's for coming from an open area. Think of places where you're just at or on, not really in.
So, for example, you come von der Bushaltestelle, from the bus stop, or vom Dach, from the roof, or vom Strand, from the beach. You can't really be inside the beach, right? You're just at the beach, and that's a perfect von situation. Now, the other big job for von is super important. You use it when you're not talking about a physical place at all, but when you're coming from a person, an institution, or some kind of event. For instance, you'd say, ich komme vom Arzt. I'm coming from the doctors. I mean, you weren't physically inside the doctor, right? It just means you were at their office. Same goes for activities like, ich komme from einem Konzert. If it's a person or an event, von is your go-to. All right, it's the moment of truth. We've got the rules for aus and von in our back pocket, so let's head back to that supermarket and finally put this puzzle together. And here's where it all clicks. If you say, ich komme aus dem Supermarkt, you are focusing on the physical action. You're saying, I am walking out of the building right now. But if you say, ich komme vom Supermarkt, you're focusing on the activity. You're saying, I'm coming from the shop, as in, I was just at the supermarket. It's a subtle, but really powerful difference. Okay, just one last little piece to make sure you sound like a total pro when you use these. It's a quick grammar point, and I promise it's not as scary as it looks. So both aus and von are what we call dative prepositions. Now, all you need to know for right now is that this is the magic that happens behind the scenes. It's why der Supermarkt suddenly becomes dem Supermarkt after you use aus or von. You don't have to be an expert, just notice that the article changes. And this right here is a real game changer for sounding natural. In German, von and dem almost always get squished together to become vom. So you'll hear ich komme vom Supermarkt all the time. Now, you might hear Germans say aus for aus dem in casual speech, but vom is totally standard and you should definitely use it. Whew, we've covered a lot of ground. So let's take everything we just learned and boil it all down into one simple final cheat sheet that you can save for later. And there you have it. This makes it crystal clear. You're going to use aus for leaving enclosed spaces, those containers, and for your origin. You'll use von for open spaces, people, and events. And for those tricky places, like a shop, just remember the nuance. Aus is about leaving the building, and von is about being at the place or event.
Okay, now it's your turn. I want you to actually think about it. Where are you coming from right now? Are you inside a room? Are you coming from work, from a walk? Try to answer the question for yourself in German.